Will you join me in a moment of prayer? Holy One, come and inhabit this space. May these words and our hearing guide us toward joy, guide us toward you. Amen. I've shared before in this space, so some of you may have heard it, the fact of my experience with depression. Every fall, along with my light exposure therapy glasses, which make me look like the character from Dr. Spock, who has this funny eye thing on, I began keeping tabs on my symptoms to ensure I don't get too far depressed before I notice, which is actually a thing when you are a high-performing worker and mother who is used to simply showing up and doing the work regardless of how you feel. Everyone's symptoms and expressions of depression can be different, but one of my biggest markers, one of my danger indicators, is when I stop experiencing joy. If I'm not paying attention, and sometimes even if I am, I'll look up and realize that life has become this soul-sucking cycle. A grim march through my daily task list during the day, and then an escapist checkout in the evening on screens. But you don't have to feel depressed to find yourself in that cycle this season, to look up and realize that you might be lacking some joy. The absence of loved ones who have recently or not so recently passed, or perhaps are just absent from your lives, with whom holiday memories are all wrapped up. The tang of regret over lost or broken relationships, or paths not taken, or a life that played out differently than you expected, made more poignant during this season by all the Rockwell images put on display in the furious Christmas marketing to get us to buy something. Loneliness, a sense of paralyzing grief over what is happening in the world that leads us to glazing over the news and shutting down our emotional response to it because it feels too hard. All of these things can lead us to be searching for that experience of joy. Or perhaps not. Some Advent, some Christmas season, it just arrives. We are in a season of Advent, of preparing our hearts and our lives for the Holy Child to come, the incarnational baby who will soon arrive once more in our world. During this Advent season, when we feel grief, when we feel loss, when we experience sorrow, we might feel like we are feeling the wrong emotion for this season. After all, how can we feel joy in the midst of everything that is happening? But the thief of joy isn't sorrow or grief. It's apathy. It's numbness. Apathy over the way things are. The belief that all that is now is all that will ever be, and that there's no point in exerting effort or life force to change anything. Numbness of refusing to be emotionally drawn into the world, withdrawing instead from the pain and strife through an absence of feeling. Sometimes we do those things, shut down in that way, intentionally. Sometimes our bodies just take over in protection because it can all feel a bit much. That's understandable. But our capitalist world, our society of production and power, is served by our apathy, benefits from our numbness. When we're checked out of human feeling or convinced of our uselessness, we can easily become reduced to machines of doing or cogs of consumption to feel something. Our capacity for grasping the miracle of an infant born in a stable that we will talk about 2,000 years later, for imagining a new world that this babe promises, dries up in the dust of numbness and apathy. It does not serve our world to avoid feeling, but making room for joy in the midst of it all is an act of resistance. Making room for joy does not mean you stop feeling sorrow, grief, anguish. Rather, it insists that joy can live side by side with them. Making room for joy insists that there is more to life than what duties you can meet. Making room for joy demands we live rather than simply produce. Making room for joy, it requires that we push beyond our apathy and numbness to connection. Making room for joy means that we take care to tend to that which delights, which connects, which softens us, even in the midst of the world's suffering. I believe that the Holy wants for us to live in joy. It does not serve us or honor the divine to keep it at an arm's length. It does not lessen the suffering of others or balance the scales of justice for us to mute or avoid it. Feeling joy does not mean we are not also grieving or sorrowful or angry. As our poet today and Sexton reminds us, there is joy in all. Making room for joy, a little nestle of welcome for the holy in your heart will look different for each of us. Last night, for me, it meant pausing my dinner prep where I could see part of the sunset and stepping outside during that magnificent lit up sky, taking in the 360-degree view as it colored the entire sky until it faded to indigo. It might mean, as our poet said, noticing what's right in front of you, the chapel of eggs, the song of a kettle. Might mean allowing yourself to feel the loneliness that you've been keeping at bay. It might mean pushing past your apathy to call your representatives to advocate for peace. It might mean saying no to some obligations this Christmas and saying yes to the thing you actually want to do. It might mean getting to the gym to break a sweat. But the first step for many of us is to remember that making room for joy is a sacred endeavor, not a frivolous one. When we light the candle of joy, the pink candle on our Advent wreath, when we prepare for the Holy Child, we are asked to crack the door to our hearts open again. The Holy is knocking this Advent season. Let us open the door to all of life, to the pain and joy of living, to saying yes to having the Holy dwell within us and within our world. Let us say yes to joy and yes to the divine guests knocking at our door.